Wow, you made my heart really big. Sometimes when you come back to the scene of the crime, you kind of slink, but this was a very victorious moment. Thank you. Everybody should be able to feel how I feel right now.
Well, I was going to ask, how does it feel to be back in South Dakota? But
yeah, I know. We're in South Dakota, right? It feels great. It was such a big part of my life. Making movies, I mean, thank you for going to the movies all these years. Number one, I've made them for you, and I love that.
Well, indeed, at this time, 20 years ago, you were here in South Dakota filming Dances with Wolves, on which filming lasted from July 18th to November 23rd, 1989. The first George Bush was president. Mark McGuire and Jose Canseco were leading the Oakland A's to a world championship well before baseball started testing for banned substances. The mullet was considered a very hip haircut at that time. One of us might have had one of those. But there was a... And there was a movie out that year called Field of Dreams. So you, yeah. So you were at the top of your game, and I'm wondering, at this point, are you saying to yourself, this is where I call my shot, now is the time to make Dances with Wolves?
You know, one of the hardest things in America is to be able to hear the ticking of your own heart. What I mean by that is there's a whole world out there that tells us who the best dressed is, who's worst, who's in, who's out. You know, it's this whole barrage of noise, and it's really hard to hear our own heart about what we want to be. And a lot of times in America, you can do what you want to do, and maybe the idea that you're not going to make a lot of money will go with it. But it's what your heart wants to do. And I knew that I needed to find that in my life. And once I did that, I started calling the shots in my own life. I knew how to say no. I knew what I wanted to be about. I knew I wanted to make Westerns. I knew they weren't in vogue. But it didn't take success for me to feel powerful. When I knew what I wanted to be, I felt powerful. I don't always go to the end game. I don't always go to the premiere in my life. I've always liked the journey. In fact, I'm very much a worker bee. I like to write. I like to edit. Yes, you can see on Entertainment Tonight the red carpet, and it's not like I don't enjoy that night, but I never orchestrated my career for it. I've always liked the work. I like going in the morning, and I like not coming home till I'm done. And that's somehow the way I think you know when you love your work.
About 3 years before you started filming Dances with Wolves, you encouraged Michael Blake, who wrote the script for Dances with Wolves, to turn the screenplay into a novel to improve its chances of being adapted into a film. A number of publishers rejected it, but you purchased the film rights with the idea of directing it. What was it that you liked about the story of Dances with Wolves?
Well, it's an interesting story, the making of something. One of the hardest things when you're in the business and you're kind of successful is a lot of people send you screenplays, and a lot of your friends send you screenplays. And, it's a very difficult position to be in that God spot where they think you're going to make a difference in their life if you say yes. So it's sometimes when people hands me something that I know, it's almost like my worst nightmare. I'm thinking, oh, God. And I'll tell you a very interesting story about Michael. Michael's a child of the 60s, so that means he's disgruntled a lot. And we grew up trying to be in the business, and Michael wasn't having some success, and I began to have some success. And of course, I tried to bring my friends along at every step that I could, and Michael was exactly the same. But every meeting I ever got from Michael, he pissed somebody off. He made them mad. And as I began to move in my career and he wasn't moving, he was getting more disgruntled, and he was getting angry, and he was getting to this point where I was getting tired of him. And one night, and because I would send him to friends of mine, and he would say something. And I'd go, why would you do that? I wish somebody would have tried to help me when I was starting. No, they don't know anything. They don't know anything. One night, he's over at my house, and he starts in again, and he starts to talk about people who have now become some of my friends. And something about me snapped, and I grabbed him, and I lifted him in my own living room. I said, Michael, I said, I'm starting to get really tired of you. I said, you know what? You think you're a writer? Then write. You know, if you're so sick of Hollywood not accepting your scripts, then don't write a script. Write a short story. Write a novel. Write a story that ends on page 888 or 88. But forget these things, and when I realized they had them up in the air, I looked down underneath them, and there were some scripts, and I kicked them out from under him, and they dramatically slid over there, and I thought, have him up in the air. And I said, quit trying to write these. If you're so sick of Hollywood, then quit trying to be a part of it. And I put my friend down. And then I didn't know if we would be friends. I didn't know if our friendship had ended. I thought probably maybe it had. And about 2 months later, Michael doesn't have a place to live. And he goes, can I come live at your house? And I said, yes. And he says, I'm writing this thing. And he goes, do you want to read it? I said, no. And every night he would write on it. He said, I have something that's really good. You want to read it? I said, no. So he started having my daughter come in and listen to him. And my young daughter, she was like 3. And he would read to her. And my wife started saying, I don't know if we should do this. He's on his bed in his underwear and he's reading to Annie. And I go, well, he's Michael, and he just wants somebody to hear his story. After about a month and a half, you know, wives have the tendency to go, I go, okay. So he left, and he went to Bisbee, Arizona, and he worked on a ranch killing raccoons, and in the evening, he cleaned dishes in a Chinese restaurant, and he said he was out of money. Did I have any? I said, yes, but I'm not sending you money. I went to the sporting goods store, and I got him sleeping bags and Coleman stoves, and I got him everything. You live. And he goes, do you want to read my story? He left his story, and I said, have you read it yet? I said, no. I didn't read it for the longest time, and one day I looked, it was holding up the door. It was a doorstop. This was absolutely true, and I began to read it. And I was never so proud of Michael as I started to read. He'd written a novel, and it was Dances with Wolves, and it was sitting, holding my door open. And he wrote a story that didn't end on page 120, which is the average page count for a script in Hollywood. He wrote what was in his heart, and I told him that I would make this movie if I could. And so for $75,000, I hired my first secretary. I remember my first interview. I didn't know how to interview anybody, and I looked at her, and she looked at me. I said, well, some important people are going to call here, so you got to kind of answer it. And she said, okay. She was from Missouri, and I said, you know, like presidents once in a while will call. She was, okay. And I looked at her, and I finally said, and I guess you got to be kind of on time, right? It was like I was like, who the hell's interviewing who here? So I hired a secretary. I came to South Dakota, to your beloved state, and for $75,000, I had a script written. I scouted it. I knew where I wanted to make this movie. And that was the time when I read a script of somebody that my heart was big. And that was Michael's story. From up on the wall to, I still want to put him on the wall sometimes. But he's a tremendous talent. It was a beautiful moment in his life, and now it's part of your life.
Now, you could have gone to a lot of places to make this film. Why was it important to you to come to South Dakota?
I just, you know, some people look at the Great Plains and they go, so what? And I look at them and I just see a lot of beauty. I see the light. There was great drama here. And if people look, that's all they see is the flat. But if they look deeper, they can find their ancestry here. They can find people who had great conflict, where people had to live resourcefully, where two different groups of people saw the buffalo as an ends to, one as a means to survival and the other one as a means to destruct. This was a complicated place, even though people think of this as a simple place. It's a place of great history, and I have always loved it.
What was it? What were the things about the Lakota culture that you felt were particularly important to portray?
What was important to me was to see the humor of the people that lived here, the drama, the boredom of their life, of a man can't get comfortable because his daughter has left a doll on his buffalo robe. I've always seen people as the same. First girlfriend I ever loved was Diana Ross. I never seen color in my life. And it's no surprise I put Whitney Houston in The Bodyguard. So for me, it's very important in any movie I do that the humanity of it come out. And if humanity comes out, you're going to see flaws, and you're going to see humor, you're going to see love, and you're going to see tragedy. And those are the things that make up American cinema.
I was watching the film again last night, and you forget.
Ooh, an all-nighter.
Oh, yeah.
I see you're really prepared. Can I see those cliff notes myself?
There you go. But you forget how much humor there is in that movie, and I was thinking about the scene in particular where it really hit me was the first time you encountered Kickingbird, or that Dunbar encounters Kickingbird, and you're chasing him off, and then all of a sudden you look down and you realize, whoa, I have no clothes on.
Right. He was enjoying his this is the Garden of Eden until men showed up, and started stealing horses and carving up the land. Yeah, the movie, it's interesting because Dances is a terribly violent movie, if you think about it. But no one thinks about it that way. They think about it as more of a poem, as a poetry. But if you think about the opening sequence of a broken ankle and someone trying to commit suicide and someone blowing their brains out and all the violence that ensues, Timmons being shot 8-9 times, the studios wanted me to take some of those arrows out. They said the movie's an R. And I said, the movie's not an R, but if you want to give it an R, go ahead. Well, if you take some arrows out, I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I said, I'm not going to do any of that. What happened was the tragedy of Timmons, you go from laughing one moment where he's eating bacon to where he's shot in the rear end. Now, I knew the audience was going to laugh on the first arrow. I knew it. But after the third or fourth, people would quit laughing. Because that's how sometimes death hits us. And somebody else is playing with him like a little mouse in the field. And as the others were ransacking the wagon, he was having the slow death of a very skilled warrior, taking his time, who was almost bored. And so the film has a lot of vulgarity in its violence, and yet it was something that has played out every day, and I believe in that. I believe in violence, and I believe it has to be personal, because if it's not personal, it won't shake you to your core. When you see movies where 300 people die and you don't feel a thing, those movies don't get R, but I have one single death and they want to give me an R. That's okay. I'll live with the hypocrisy of that, but I won't denute the film because of it.
We have some clips, and I want to go back to that early scene with Lieutenant Dunbar, and he is on his horse and essentially trying to commit suicide. And if we can show that, and then we'll talk about it after we take a look.
All right by me. Forgive me, Father.
got him. In that scene, it's so moving. Your hands are back, your head is thrown back. I'm curious about what kind of place you put yourself in as you're doing this scene.
It's a very Catholic moment. The scene was really a lot about the boredom of war and the stalemate of one group not wanting to expose himself and a guy who is in so much pain who basically says, I will do it, and I want to die, this pain is so bad. And what happens is it almost becomes a carnival for the guys on the other side. And this is a perfect state to know that this can happen, because how many of you have all shot at a pheasant and he just keeps going? You liars. Well, it happens sometimes when you don't hit something. And so it was this moment. And like I say, I try to draw on real things. And you know, Mark Twain talked about one of the darkest moments. Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, served in the Union Army. And he talks about a moment in his life where he was with 6 or 7 soldiers, and a Confederate soldier rode by, and they all decided to shoot at him. And they hit him. And they killed him. And of course, they went over like curious people. And Samuel Clemens said he never had such a hollow feeling in his stomach, because he'd gotten caught up in the theatrics of the boredom, that this was just somebody to shoot at. Yes, he was the enemy, but it was really more about some kind of arcade. And the only solace that Samuel had was he said, I'm not sure if it was my bullet. It probably wasn't. I wasn't a very good shot. So he eked out the smallest bit of humor, but it was a hole that forever stayed in his heart. So I try to conjure up these things in movies, and that moment is a very real moment to me, as theatrical as it is. I think it's a moment about surrendering and saying, I'm done here. But the next line is actually the first line that I remember in the book, when it says, the strangeness of this life cannot be measured. In trying to commit my own suicide, I was elevated to the status of a living hero. And I thought, I knew what the poetry of this movie would be about at that moment.
As you're doing that scene, and you really have to, as with any scene in any movie, I suppose, you really have to focus on that moment and be in that moment. But you're also directing the film, and so I'm imagining that you're lining up these soldiers, they're positioning people. How do you do all of this? Do you have to compartmentalize? How do you manage it?
It's very hard. At one point, the Union, these are reenactors who take their roles very seriously. The Union and Confederacy, in fact, they take it so seriously that these pricks don't talk to each other. So when I got them all together at one time, just about I was getting ready to go out and work, one of them came in and said, we're billeted too close to these guys. And I was thinking, oh, what does that mean? You're billeted too, we're too close to them, and my men are offended and they don't want to do this. And I thought, where's my dad when I need him? And I thought my movie was going down the drain right at the moment. What was I going to do? And I finally said, listen to me, soldier. I said, do you know anything about taking orders? He went, yes, sir. I said, then you're going to start taking them. I said, and I started talking to him, and I was speaking in tongues, I think. I started talking military, and he just backed up, and I said, you will billet next to them, and you will do it with grace and with dignity and professionalism. And I said, you got that clear? And he went, yes, sir. And he walked out, and I said, that worked. And I said, And soldier, I want to see you ride by my trailer every morning to work, and I want to salute. Do you understand? He said, yes, sir. And I said, Dixie will be playing. And it all started to fall together for me. You know, that ends with one man getting hit in the forehead. And so I'll give you a little sidebar that nobody knows about. It was my dad that shot the gun. So I've got all these guys. I'm directing the whole army. I got to put my dad in the movie. I said, oh, Dad, you come out, you get down here, and you shoot this guy. He must have asked me 50 times, okay, now come out and I shoot this guy. I said, yeah. I just said that. You come out and you shoot this guy. You know, when you direct your parents, it's really hard. You know, these movies are as personal as they are professional to me. My parents, you have to understand, my parents went to every Little League game I ever was in, every play I was ever in. And you're not going to believe this, they came out in a trailer and watched me direct every day of my first movie. My mom said, we won't bother you. We're going to be on that hill. I said, okay, Mom. Their trailer, every morning they sat out in 2 lawn chairs, and my mom would wave at me as I walked in. I'd be walking like this and go. They go back to work, they go. So that's the kind of parents I had. And to probably put this completely in perspective, when the movie was over, they left Los Angeles and they moved to Spearfish and have been here for the rest of their lives. I think it added 10 years to their life. And so I have South Dakota to thank for many things.
How much, you talk about your parents being there. This is your first time directing. You're the star of the film. Yeah. This is your baby. You're making a Western epic, which you've wanted to do. How much pressure was there on you? And how did you deal with it?
I didn't think about it. I knew that the only person that could ruin it was me. And
that's pressure.
And it is. But I thought, you know, I love. I didn't think about it, you know. I mean, sometimes in retrospect, if I look back, I maybe would have, knowing what I know now, I would have maybe been too afraid to try it. But back then, I just knew that I wanted to direct, and I wanted to tell a story that had a level of meaning to me, and I just wanted to do it. And I didn't care where the chips fell. In fact, I put my own money up to make the movie. And I just wanted to tell my own stories.
I want to look at another clip.
To be honest, I couldn't make Star Wars. And that's not a knock. I don't know how to do that. And I appreciate those that do. But I can make a story with men and women who carved out a life for themselves.
The way Hollywood is today, could Dances with Wolves be made now, 20 years later?
Yeah. It takes a force of will. The money that I got for a purely American film came from Europe first. I went to every studio twice to make Dances with Wolves. In the very last studio, Warner Brothers, what I had friends at, they go, we really like to make this. What they really wanted was my next movie. They thought I was making this little movie. Okay, let's pay Kevin a little money here to let him go direct. Then he'll come back to the fold, and we'll be able to make some more of these Bull Durhams and these things. So go off and make this movie. But they go, we have a little trouble with the length here. And this subtitle business is just not going to fly. And why don't we drop the Civil War sequence and start right out there on the frontier? And I remember it was my second time at Warner Brothers. And this is not to make them the bad guy, because I had been to every studio. And Jim Wilson, my partner, was with me, and we were in that room, and I was listening to these executives, and when they were all done, I said, you know, I'm not going to do that. I said, I'm not going to lose that Civil War sequence, and the subtitles are very important to me because the essence of Dances with Wolves for me is that men of goodwill could not talk to each other because of the language difference. And when you can't talk to each other, out of that comes conflict. And yet, that's the poetry of dances. So if we have them both speaking English, there's no struggle. There's no sense of humor. There's no level of misunderstanding. So when I explained this to the executives, they were like, uh-huh. And I said, let me bring up one other thing. It's probably something you guys ought to know. I also want final cut. Well, this meeting was over. So, shake hands. I walk out the door. I don't get 2 feet from the door when my partner grabs me and she goes, Kevin, what was that? I go, what was what? He goes, that. And I said, Jim, I said, you heard what they said. Didn't you hear what they said? We can't let them do that. He goes, the final cut. What was that? And I said, Jim, if they don't understand the language barrier, if they don't understand the subtitles, if they want the Civil War sequence to go away, that means they don't understand the movie. And if they don't understand the movie, how can I let these professionals be in the position of cutting it? He looked at me and said, you're so hard to take sometimes. But I understand now what you mean. And so we walked away. I raised money overseas. Orion Studios, who I just made Bull Durham for, wanted my next movie. So they kicked in a grand total of $4 million, and we made dances for $13 million. I mortgaged my house and came up with another $3 million, and we made it for $16 million.
You talk about those Lakota language scenes. I want to take a look at another clip and then talk about how you manage those scenes. Let's look at clip number 2.
Tona au kete kihe. Slo yaya ya chinyelo. Kola lila ota. Au kete lo ota.
How many?
Like the stars. Wichompi. Wichompi. Lakota ki tanta hapi. Nihimi chielo.
How did you decide when it was going to be in Lakota, when it was going to be in English, and how did you manage those scenes with different languages going on and subtitles and all of that?
It pretty much was how Michael and I mapped it out. Once in a while, I would look at it and go, we don't need it there. It's very clear what's going on. Other times, people, when they want to tell a friend something very important, always choose their words very carefully. There's a haltingness about it, and this has been weighing very much on Dunbar's mind to how much to tell his friend. Because Dunbar still had the pull of being a military man. You know what I mean? At what point are you something? Confusion is with all men. But his kind of love of the people at that point, he felt that he was someone he could tell this to. And that could be a studio scene. That's too slow. Let's move on. Let's get to the fight. We don't need to know about the stars. There's a million stars. Everybody knows that. What? I happen to like this scene. It's so funny in Hollywood. You have no idea that whenever a movie gets made and you like it, it's almost a miracle.
How much did people have to work on learning the language, getting the dialect right, all of that?
I was very upset with my Lakota actors at one moment. I was very upset. They weren't learning their lines. They were jacking around. I created 2 weeks before the movie started where they could ride and shoot, and it was like camp. It was like YMCA camp. But when we'd come to rehearsal, they didn't know their lines. I mean, some of them actually knew the language, but the majority did not. And I was starting to get pissed. And I was also realizing that our movie wasn't going to be any good. And I didn't know what to do. I really didn't know what to do. I was at a loss. And I went to Mary, who was a great stage. Graham Greene knew his stuff. He was a wonderful actor. But I'm saying a lot of the new actors that for the first time, it was just a lark for them. And I went to Mary, and I said, Mary, I said, I'm going to go into rehearsal today, and I'm going to blast everybody. Mary played Stands with a Fist. And I said, I'm also going to blast you. I need you to know that I'm not talking to you. I said, but we're losing our movie. And so I went in. They're all ready to rehearse, they thought. They didn't know how to rehearse. They looked beautiful. I mean, the men and women in dances look beautiful, and they just do. And I came in, hey, Kevin. I said, everybody sit down. And I said, you're not going to be sitting here for long. I said, number one, you don't know what you're doing. You're not acting professional. I need for you to understand your lines, and you don't know them. So the first thing that's going to happen here, you're not going to waste my time anymore. I'm going to be really good in this film because I know my lines. And I said, you might have half your parts cut because you don't know your... You're speaking for a whole nation. You're speaking for a whole group of people, not just Lakota, but every indigenous people who got walked on. You're never going to look this young, this beautiful, this handsome. Do your work. Rehearsal's over. So is the YMCA. And when you're ready to work, I'll be ready to work. And by that way, we're coming back in here tomorrow at 6 o'clock. And if you don't know your lines, I'm going to recast you. That's what I thought, not what they thought. What the hell did I just do? And they walked out. And I thought, have I lost my movie again? And they came back, and they were ready to work. And they never will look as young and as beautiful as they did in that movie.
There were a lot of things that you had to manage with that film. And I remember reading a while back, not long after it was made, about the extras. And there were a lot of extras, and at one point, the extras, the particular piece I was reading was from the perspective of a man who did this over the course of the time that you were shooting, and said, yeah, you know, it wasn't easy, and some guys weren't happy about the food. And he talked about how you came down to address their concerns about the food, which I thought, wow, I mean, you had a lot to deal with there. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I ask a lot of people, and it's not, you know, it's easy in a movie to create these echelons. That someone has this and someone has that. And when I found out that they were less than happy, I wanted to know why. And it sounded reasonable to me, and so we just fixed it. That's all.
But you could have sent somebody else. You went down there to fix it.
Yeah, I don't like being a referee, but when it comes to eating, it's not too much to ask to feed people great. I wasn't able to pay the extras a lot of money. I should be able to feed them really great. And that's what I said. I'm only going to cast native extras. Only the first people are going to play themselves, and they're going to eat what I eat. That's all.
Where were you when I was an extra? That's. You had a chance to work with this wonderful wolf, Two Socks, and it may have been more than one wolf. I don't know, but tell us a little bit about.
I hated those wolves. I hated it.
What?
I tell you, when they first showed up, it's like, you know, like a vacuum salesman ever comes to your house, you know, vacuum salesman. Oh, surprise, this Hoover with this Electrolux. Goes, give me ash, give me ashes, throw the ashes in. Give me some jelly. Throw the jelly in it. Give me some, throw it in. It's clean, isn't it? Yeah, it's clean. That's pretty good. I'll buy it. See you later. Call up your friend. Come over and see my Electrolux. Come over and see my Hoover. Throw some on my floor. Go ahead, throw some on my floor. Throw some more. Honey, damn it. You want to kill that salesman. You'd like to find him because as soon as he leaves, that Electrolux doesn't work like it's supposed to work. You're thinking maybe he had his own cigarettes, maybe he had his own jelly. These guys brought these wolves to me, and they go, he'll do this. And I thought, that wolf's pretty good. So I bought the wolves. I was 10 days over schedule after 3 weeks of shooting. The Bond company wanted to shut my movie down. I couldn't get the wolves to work right. And I didn't know what to do. In fact, we shot 108 days. I was 25 days over schedule. I only went 3% over budget because I managed my money. But these wolves, these prick wolves, I couldn't figure it out. And finally, I said, where's the owner? He says, he's in L.A. I said, get him out here. Get him out here. So the owner comes, and the scene where I actually dance with the wolf, right, where the three are going, and I'm out there going like that with the wolf doing all that stuff. The guy came out and I said, your wolf ain't working. You salesman, you. It's not working at all. And he goes, well, what's wrong? I said, I'm trying to explain to you that it's not working. It's not happening. It's really not happening. And I said, you know, well, it's got to be happening. I said, I tell you what, we're just about to do a scene, okay, out there, and I had a wire. You couldn't see the wire. And it was a long shot. And I said, you look kind of like me. Why don't you put on my uniform and get inside the wire? Well, I'll do it. I says, you will. You bet your ass you will. Get out there. So I go up by the camera, really far away, keep in mind, you know, long shot, so you can't tell. And I said, when you play with the wolf, get him to try to chase you. Get him to do this kind of thing, right? Make it fun. And the guy goes, okay. So I go, call action on the radio because he's real far away. And he starts doing this, and it starts working beautifully. I mean, every time he moves, the wolf moves. He moves again, and the wolf's like right there. And I'm thinking, this looks really good. This guy's great. So it goes like that. The wolf's right in front of him. After about 15 seconds, the guy goes like this. He runs and jumps out of the wire. I have to yell, cut, and I'm thinking, why am I, cut? It was looking great. And the guy runs all the way up to me 100 yards. I go, what happened? It was looking good because he bit me. He bit me. I thought, oh, give me the uniform. So I go in there with this wolf who's tasted blood. So that dancing is some real... I went in, I had meat in my pockets, I would run, and the wolf would chase me, and he was more interested in the meat. So I would run, and when he got close to me, I said, go get that, go get that. And he would be after me, and he'd see that meat, and he'd go get that, and he'd eat all of them. I'd sneak up close to him, I said, let's go, go get that. Making movies has been a joy for me, and it's really very much like playing football and drawing a play in the street, drawing it in the dirt. It was fun. That was a moment, and a true moment.
Well, you know, I had this whole setup written for our next clip, but we don't need it. Just go ahead, roll the next clip.
Go home! Go home! Damn him. Hey! God! Go home! Go! Go home, two socks. Bad wolf! Bad wolf! Tanten kile. Dawa shnapi kue. Ichoya.
Ah, ilo washtialo.
And again last night I cried when he got shot, and I'm thinking that there was this tremendous bond between.
I haven't seen it in 15 years, and it's really conjuring a lot of things up for me, myself, I know what I was going to say. The miracle of movies is that the thing is, no one really believed in the movie. You guys did, and you saw the plains with not a tree out there, and I thought it looked beautiful. But when I screened the movie, they thought it was going to come and go. It was 3 hours. And I remember we were going to screen on successive nights. What's the word you say it?
Successive?
Yeah, perfect.
Sure.
So we screened in Phoenix, and the next night we screened in Seattle. And everybody really thought we had a disaster on our hands. They really did. And we went, and we screened it, and the numbers came back extraordinary. There's these things called focus groups where they ask an audience how a movie should end. Is it too long? They always say it's too long. They said, is this movie too long? It's like nobody said it was too long. It was everything that the conventional wisdom was everything was wrong. And I want to remind students and even all of you in the room, conventional wisdom. And why I say that is because what if everybody's wrong? And that's a real question. And what they said was, so they couldn't find any holes in the movie, but they found two, because it was like, what scenes do you like the most? People range the scenes that they like the most. What scenes do you like the least? We don't like the guy using the journal for toilet paper. We don't like the wolf dying, and we don't like the horse dying. Kevin, if you cut these scenes, you could have a perfect movie. Look at the scores. This is what people, they don't like it. They don't like the wolf dying. They don't like the horse dying. This toilet paper. And I was thinking, God, they're putting me in this position of being maybe a megalomaniac. Here it is. We've made this movie, subtitles. It's 3 hours long. Can you give us a bone, buddy? Can you give us something? And I thought, you're going right to the heart of the movie. And so I had to say no to them. And they walk away going, this Kevin, he's just not going to give us an inch. It's not true. I do collaborate. But I think people have a false impression about what collaboration is. Collaboration, to me, is not that I take your idea, but that I create an environment where you're not afraid to give me one. And then I decide if I can absorb it in my movie. I don't want to see the wolf die either. Not really. We have to let these people go home.
Yeah.
I love talking, but I don't want to bore, so.
There's one more thing I have to ask you about. I'm guessing a lot of people have questions about it, and it's the last clip we'll show, but it's the scene where it's the buffalo hunt, and ties in a little bit with what you were just talking about. And let's just roll it and then have Kevin explain exactly what went on here.
Well, the great thing about that moment was my stunt guide, who immediately bolted out, and he just said, "How are you? How are you?" I said, "I'm fine." And I said, "Give me your horse." And he looked at me, and he just made the decision to do it.
You know, this is a man directing the film. If he wasn't ready, then I would have had to say, I got to do it, Kevin. I'm sorry, because somebody has to step in and say that. But he was ready. He got back on my horse and got back in there, and he got some of the best stuff.
My man, how much courage did it take to get back up on that horse?
Well, I was paying for the damn movie, and the herd was leaving. That's really how I thought about it. A horse had thrown, I went for, again, the first people rode with the buffalo. And there was something very spiritual about what happened. It hadn't been done like that for the last 120 years. And they were all rodeo riders, so that means they're all a little goofy. Means they're willing to ride and ride with abandon. And they did. And it touched something very deep in their soul. The first time the buffalo came over, no one knew what to expect. They were being herded by helicopter and by trucks. We were all waiting, and it said, "The buffalo are 15 minutes away." We're all like, okay. They're 7 minutes away. They started running. The time went from 15 to 7 to 10 to 3, and everybody mounted up, and I looked at them in their eyes, and I knew they were ready. I knew they were ready as young men, as men who would ride once again for their people. And for 6 days, we rode with those buffalo. And the first time they rode with them, nobody shot an arrow. They were so scared. And after the 6th day, they were coming back, had loosed all their arrows. They had tied in to what was most important, what was the absolute beauty of a Lakota on a horse, unmatched by anybody that ever rode horses. And for me, at that particular moment, you saw one of the guys was knocked from his horse, and his horse ran out blindly from the herd at a perpendicular. We were going this way. I never saw it. And it could have easily stopped the production. In fact, I wasn't supposed to ride. The bond company had come out that day from insurance purposes and would not let me ride. But I fooled them. I brought out some chamber music. I brought out 3 musicians in tuxedos, put them at the tent where the catering was, and we had jambalaya. And I told them, I said, "I'll meet you at the jambalaya tent. We're having music." And they went, "Oh, yippee skippy." So they went like pigs to the trough. My partner's up in a helicopter going, "Go, Kev, you can go now." Here comes a herd. They're eating jambalaya, listening to the music, and the most sickening thing my partner had to say, said he heard on the radio, "Kevin's down." And he wondered at that moment if he had done the wrong thing. And like I said, my friend, who was one of the little boys in the Cowboys, who was a stuntman, a lot of people got their first jobs on dances. A lot of people got their first Oscars in dances. And it was just really a magical time. And I said, I've got to go chase this herd down. And he goes, I know you do, because it was everything I had. And I'll remember something I'll never forget was wanted to run the herd one more time, just one more time. And this time they wouldn't run. And Jim said, we got everything at them and they won't run. And I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm going to drop the helicopter lower. And they dropped the helicopter all the way to the ground. And one bull came out. And he looked at that helicopter. And the helicopter, they started playing chicken. And finally that buffalo had enough. And he charged the helicopter. The helicopter lifted up, and Jim said they won't run anymore. And we were done. Thank you. Thank you.